Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto fall in love with Sui-Fong? Part 2. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, so without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Naruto sighs as he rubs the back of his head and looks at the two women across from him. Sui-Fong was currently bickering with the stoic woman, who had recently coated her blade in the blonde bomber's blood and had no hesitation in doing it, as well as he shook his head. He had told the others that she was another from the Fong family, but otherwise that she, like Sui-Fong, swore fealty to him. Of course, this meant she had to go back with them to Konoha and get registered as a ninja. She of course had no issues with this. Sui-Fong and her had never gotten along, as she was, as she said, the 2nd Division's attack dog, killing any defectors and helping whenever heavy combat was needed, but it was their personalities that clashed, the stoic and calm Sui-Fong and the bloodthirsty and battle-hungry Karasuba. Kakashi of course was eyeing her from the corner, weary of this new arrival, even if he had vouched for her, and Sakura had greeted the woman who was surprisingly respectful for the bloodthirsty woman she was. When did his life get so complicated? He watched as Sui-Fong give up and trying to lecture the woman and huffs in exasperation before stomping her way back to her lover's side and stands as he chuckles to himself and looks at her. "You're working yourself up for no reason, B-chan. You know we don't have to worry about her," he says, rubbing her hair once more before her hand smacks his away. "I still don't understand how you can have her in the 2nd Division. You should have given her to Kenpachi Taicho. Trust me, I've thought about it, B-chan. But at the same time, I knew what it was like. So I had a bit of sympathy for her," he says as she looks at him curiously at this. "What do you mean, Naruto-sama? Well, have I told you how I met her? I don't think you have," she says as he chuckles a bit as he rifled through his memories, remembering how he first had met Karasuba. Soul Society 200 years ago. Naruto huffed as he kicked the tree once more, Sui-Fong currently out on a mission with Uchiha at the moment, as he was currently shirtless, sweating as he looked at the bark-stripped tree from all the kicks he had been doing to it as he nodded in content. He was thankful that he still remembered the Uzumaki style that Jiraiya had taught him that many years ago and was able to master it to such a degree as he decided to take a break as he reaches out and grabs his bottle of water and takes a sip as he watches as the old man, as he called him, Captain Yamamoto, walk up to him with a woman just behind, her hands twitching occasionally. "Old man?" he asks him as he closed the water bottle, not bothering to slip on his captain's Haori, as the two, despite some of their differences in how they viewed things, saw each other as grandfather and grandson, much like how Hiruzen had been years ago. And just like how the friendly old men were, that also meant that they kept a lot of secrets, and that's one thing that always bugged him, but he squashed that at the moment as he focuses on the two that were standing in front of him. "Good morning," the head captain calls out as Naruto walks up to them. "I don't know if you had heard, but there has been an interesting development," he says as Naruto's eyes wandered over to the silver-haired woman as he nods. "You see, she had begun the process of holification when we had performed a konso on her," he says as Naruto nods at this. "And what does that mean, old man?" he asks her as he crosses his arms. "We had sent her to Konoha to be sure that she wasn't a hollow, and no, she isn't, however the holification process has left a, shall we say, imprint on her soul. Young Karasuba here, her name, is feeling the cravings for hunter or lusting after something to fill that void, but it's not a ravenous hunger. We are hoping that you would be able to train her, perhaps to refine that. So she's still 100% Shinigami, correct? I don't want to be surprised by a zero one day because her training was meant for Shinigami," he asks as the head captain nods. "Not to worry, she is, but we needed to classify this, and they had classified her as a Sekirei, a plus who had began the transformation but was saved," he says. "The wagtail?" Naruto asks as he nods, adding with a shrug. "I wasn't sure, I hadn't named her, I had to order Mayuri not to experiment on her," he says as he nods at the head captain. "You had trained Sui-Fong into a capable lieutenant, I am hoping that you will do the same with young Karasuba here," he explains as he nods. "I'll certainly do my best," he says as the head nods in satisfaction as he turns on his heels and leaves the two alone as Naruto looked at the woman, whose hand was twitching occasionally. She needed to unlock her Zanpakuto. Her spiritual energy for someone who hasn't been trained yet was massive, but it was still tiny compared to anyone who was trained. If she was trained correctly, she will be a force to be reckoned with. "I know the old man had told me your name, but I want you to tell me," he says as he walks over to his clothes he had taken off to exercise, before slipping them back onto his body, before putting his Haori back on, and looks at the woman who walked up to him. He could tell that she wasn't shy, but rather that she had a bloodthirsty look in her eyes, one he had seen before. "I am Karasuba Taicho," she says, giving a smile, but he saw that this smile didn't reach her eyes. Then flashback. "You've never told me this, Naruto-sama. Well, I didn't want you to look at her as something else than a Shinigami. You're right, I'm sorry. It's alright. It's in the past now. This caused him to chuckle as he remembered the amount of grueling and intensive training that would cause any of Kenpachi's men to sweat and be aching the day after. But she took it all in stride, saying how she'll use the power I give to her to slay any hollow that stood in her way. She was bloodthirsty and absolutely despised hollows for one reason or another. He suspected it was that hunger inside of her. Regardless, he trained her much like he did Sui-Fong, and this caused her to often be fighting with a woman about how things should go. He didn't mind, as he had said before, she was her own woman who could fight her own battles, and as such he left her to them. Still, he wished that they didn't fight as much as they came for the solid goal of purifying hollows and keeping the Soul Society safe. He looked at her and chuckles to himself, remembering how exactly she became his Ashikabi as they had called him. He still didn't understand these words, but he went along with it, deciding that it would be simply easier than questioning every little thing. Flashback. Naruto and Konoha were, at the moment, facing down a couple hundred hollows at this point, having been set up by Aizen and led straight into an ambush, as he was sure Aizen was hoping to get rid of one of the strongest captains of the Gate 13. Both had their weapons drawn, back to back as he looks around. You know, if Uchiha were here, he'd say that this was an excellent date, he says in a joking manner as he cuts down another hollow down, as he pants. Yes, well, I am having a fantastic time. She yells with a grin on her face as she cuts down two more. She was ashamed that these things couldn't bleed, as she would love to be covered in their blood at the moment, both her blade and her body, as she licks her lips and strikes at another. I see what my father saw, he mumbled to himself as he watched his Konoha cut them down, reminding him of a bit of his mother, who was a fantastic Ken and Fuinjutsu user. And he admitted that he could see what his father saw in a woman who knew how to wield a blade and knew when to cut loose. However, he cursed when he felt two vast Lord-class hollows converging on their positions, as he knew he had to cut down their numbers even further if they wanted any chances at surviving. He had already flared his Ryutsu, but it took a while for others to travel, and it would get their backup. Is that all you have? She yelled as she struck down an Uchiha's class hollow. Give me a damn herc, she began before she was blasted by a Zero and into one of the buildings below, leaving a gash in the earth. Konoha. Naruto calls out as he rushed over to her aid as he cut down any singular hollows that got in his way and makes his way over to her as she was clutching her blade and panting, her clothes partially torn. I'm alright, Taicho, she says as she stands. She felt her heart beating as she looks at him and looks at the vast lords who were searching for them, as the Zero had kicked up a lot of dust and debris, causing them to have a momentary respite as Konoha looks at her captain for another second. Taicho, if we are to die here. Brand me one thing, she says as this causes Naruto to look at her for a moment. What's up, Kara, she began before she felt his lips pressed against hers, which, really, wasn't what surprised him. What surprised him was the two gray wings behind her, as he could feel their souls link, mix and merge, as he relaxed into the kiss before kissing her back, his hand taking her cheeks and pulling her into a deeper kiss before eventually pulling away. He was about to ask what that was, but she beat him to it as she smirked, grabbing her blade. This is the pledge of my blade, exterminate the sworn enemy of my Ashikabi, she says as she stood, as if she didn't take a Zero a few moments earlier, a grin on her face as she held the katana in her hands and looks at the two hollows. He wondered what an Ashikabi was, though he had a suspicion that the others had told her whoever she linked to her would be. Good lord, this woman just brought up some more questions than answers. Not that he was complaining one bit, as damn did she know how to swing a blade and no doubt would look hot as hell covered in blood. You're next, she yells as she took off after the vast lord who had launched her into a building, blade in hand and a determined look in her eyes and blood-crazed grin. Damn, she was hot. Flashback end. And since then, she and him, much like Sui-Fong, were inseparable at this point, and this caused a lot of arguments between the two, one believing she wasn't worthy to be around her, now lover, and the other not giving an absolute damn what she thinks. She was secure in her own relationship with her Ashikabi and didn't need no midget to tell her that she couldn't be around him. Naruto sighs as he ran his hand through his hair once more before he heard a groan, as most of the room turned to see Gaara waking up once more. He had been awake before, but not fully cognizant of what had happened or what went down, as the doctors rushed over to his side to look him over. I'm alright. Where is she? Gaara asks as he sat up at the edge of the bed as he rubbed his arm, it absolutely sore, with the fight that he had to take part in and was almost kidnapped. Who? Asks one of the doctors. The woman who saved me, one of the doctors was about to respond when Konoha stepped forward and looks at the leader, a neutral look on her face. Right here, she says as Gaara looks at her up and down before standing and offering his hand. Thank you then for saving me. I owe you a debt of gratitude that I know I won't be able to repay, he says as she looks at his hand before shaking it and smiles. Naruto, of course, again, noting that the smile didn't reach her eyes, but didn't say otherwise. He knew how she was and loved her anyway, though he knew that Sui-Fong and Konoha would have to settle and bury the hatch eventually, as he knew that neither of them would back down from this, as he sighs. He just hoped they didn't kill each other. You should thank my Ashikabi-sama, she says, pointing to Naruto. Hess the reason I'm even out this way, but you're welcome, she says as Gaara looks at Naruto, which he then gave a small smile. Even when you're not around, Naruto, you're still around in your own way to save me, he says as he shook Naruto's hand as well. You know me, Gaara, I'm always there for my friends in one way or another, he says with a small chuckle as Gaara looks at the woman once more. I had passed out a moment after you had arrived, would you mind recanting the story of how you bested Madara? He asks her. Sure, she says with a grin. Flashback. Your executioner, she says as she had already pulled her blade from her sheath. She made no motion to move just yet before she raised her sword and pointed it at him. I cannot let you leave with that boy. Shinigami and Ashikabi-sama have a vested interest in his survival, she says, hoping that he resisted so that she was able to coat her blade in his blood. And who the hell are you on? I've never seen you in bingo book, so you must be a nobody. I'll just shove that sword down your throat, whatever's left on. He yelled as he threw some more clay explosives at her, to which she cut in half and jumped towards him, a grin on her face. I know you're low on energy, which means your blood will coat my blade that much easier. She says with a grin as Madara cursed and jumped onto the large bird that he had created and began to fly away. I don't think so. She yells as she takes a step off one of the railings, sword in hand as she cuts the wings, causing the two to fall to the floor and to the streets below. It'll make you a damn fine piece of art. He yells as he uses his chakra to make more explosives and began to throw them at her. He had already used most of his clay and chakra to fight the Kazekage, and now he was currently fighting a woman whose speed and strength with a blade were unmatched. I'll make you a piece of art, alright, with your blood covering the walls. She yells as she cuts the explosives once more, able to push through the explosives as they were relatively weak, as she took a slash at him as he stumbled back, as he looks down at his chest and groans, there a deep gash in his chest and was missing an arm. He would pass out soon of blood loss if he didn't hurry and kill this bitch. Karasuba, usually not caring for the lives of others, reaches down and grabs Gaara, now that she was standing over him from pushing the Iwa bomber back. Oi, she calls out to the ninja who were now standing above and around them on the roofs as she threw Gaara at them, as Kankuro catches him. He needs medical attention. It'll handle this, come, she says as she flicks her blade and removes the blood that had ran down her blade from the slash from Madara before she took a step, then another before there was a flash of speed as she rushed him down, a manic grin on her face. Just die. She yells as he made more clay explosives and began to throw them, this much larger than the last two attacks that she had thrown at her, as she had the sense to dodge them this time, as they took out some of the buildings behind her. She cursed knowing they were causing collateral damage, but she could do nothing as she made a stab for his gut, only to be met with another explosive at point-blank range, as it had sent her flying into one of the buildings, but him as well as he was so close to it. She stood and groans as she decided that she needed a boost in power as she took a breath. This is the pledge of my blade, exterminate the sworn enemy of my Ashikabi, she says quietly before a second later she again took off with more speed at him. Holding her blade in a reverse grip as she made yet another strike at his chest, as he managed to backpedal just in time to only get yet another gash as she continued her assault, leaving more cuts across his body, before she kicks him into a clearing as he shakily stood on death's door as he looks up and snarls. I'll kill you on, I'll kill every last one of you, he yells, knowing he wasn't going to get away alive at this point, as he rips open his coat and rips something off his chest. Stitches looks like as she watches as the mouth opens. Some shinobi around them gagging at the sight of this as her face looked impassive, blood dripping to the floor as he shoves a rather large ball of clay. I'll make the best damn work of art ever. I'll destroy the entirety of this village and leave a scar in the earth, and if that sand brat dies, then too funking bad un. He yells as lines ran over his body. 10 kilometers this village will be gone, and the work of art will leave behind a legacy. He yells as he began to laugh as the lines across his body began to retract. Nothing to say now, sword bitch, he yells as he laughs more as the shinobi didn't know how to stop it, worried if they kill him, it'll set off the explosive. You talk too much was all she said, and with a flash of her sword, he watched as his own body crumpled to the floor as his head crashed to the floor not too far away. She looked down as since the chakra had been cut off before the explosion had been released and contained, it went off like a regular tag, destroying the body as well as the head. It took a second for her body to register the pain before she coughs and fell to her knee, using her blade to keep her upright. She took too many chances charging him and taken too much damage from those explosives. She knew that if Naruto was watching that he would be chewing her out for taking needless risks and taking needless damage. Regardless, she was happy with the result as she felt the shinobi surround her. Gin-san, are you alright? Baki asks her as he motions for the medic ninja to come and heal her as she nods. Usually she didn't take this kind of help, but decided to as that she would be able to meet her Ashikabi in one piece. Karasuba was all she said. Flashback end. After that they treated my injuries and began to patch up my clothing and fed me, saying thank you and the like for saving you, she says waving her hand with a smile on her face. You can ask your friend Baki, I think his name was, to corroborate this story, otherwise, we just waited here for you to wake up, she explains as Gaara nods and looks at her. If you're with Naruto-san. Then I believe and trust you. He says with a smile as the blonde nods in thanks at this, before he turned his gaze back at her. You're always welcome back in Suna at any point, Karasuba-san, he says, shaking her hand once more. I believe that mission is complete, he began before Kakashi spoke up. Actually, if you guys want to take a bit more time after we've recovered, one of my Ninkins smelled another just outside the walls. I think it's another one of the Akatsuki. This causes Naruto and Karasuba to look up and Sui-Fong to look at the masked man. How do you know it's him? Karasuba said that he exploded, leaving nothing left for the Ninkin to track, right? She asks as he shook his head. I had some of my dogs look around for anything they can use and let me know they found some blood and scraps of the clothes, and it led outside the village to where they picked up yet another scent. We're still at 100% except for Karasuba-sen here, we can use this opportunity to kill another one of the Akatsuki, he says, as the others looked at one another for a long moment before Naruto took a step forward. I think we speak for all of us when we say that we'll go with you to take care of him, Naruto says as Kakashi nods, before looking at Sakura. Sakura, pack up on antidotes or anything to counteract poison, my Ninkin said they smelled it on whatever was making that smell. I'm coming with you, Temari says as she took a step forward. Temari, are you sure? Gaara asks her as she nods and looks at him. I can't forgive what they had just done to you, and if I can take the chance to reduce the threat to your life and to the village then I will. Don't worry, we have Naruto-kun and Karasuba-sen with us. We can handle whatever they throw at us, she says as Gaara looks at her for a long moment before nodding. Alright. Look after Naruto. You too, Naruto. Look after my sister, he says as he nods. Don't worry. I will. You get better, he says, reaching out and patting his shoulders with a smile. But Tear Harable and company. The Great Naruto Bridge, she says, looking at the absolutely massive bridge as well as the sign that stood, she was currently, and the two other Uzumaki, following the map. It seems they were only about 2 days away from Konoha at this point, as she sighed softly. There were a few times they had run into some Nuke Nin or some Sound Nin who wanted the two of them back. I'm glad Snake Funker can't control me at this point, she says as she rubs her neck. She remembered what Karen had told her, that all seals decay at different rates, and since this was the prototype before the one given to Sasuke, it practically became nothing more than a glorified tattoo, and since she could barely walk, Orochimaru didn't deem her worthy of the new seal. So she was left to rot along with Karen. I suppose Naruto-kun is quite famous, she says with a chuckle as she was staring at the same bridge as well, standing close by to Tayuya in case she needed help walking again. He is too back where I am from, she says with a chuckle as she motions for them to follow, and they did just that as they walked down the bridge, some people of course looking at them and their dress of attire, not that she could blame them, her clothes didn't exactly leave much to the imagination, and people were of course attracted to people like her, not that she minded really, it was natural. It was only when they did something without permission when she had a problem with someone's lusts. And she would promptly freeze or gut them or drown them. She having done that to a few hollows back in Hueco Mundo. She shivered lightly as that name now left a bad taste in her mouth as she sighed to herself, she was glad that her Frachians are able to rest peacefully now. What do you want with Naruto-kun anyway? Karen asks her curiously, hoping that she didn't kill her clan member, though from the feeling she got that wouldn't be the case. As they continued to walk the bridges once more, Tear had to chose her next words carefully as she looks at Karen for a second before looking back straight ahead. Shinigami-sama has taken interest in him and his abilities and wants to ensure something comes to pass. I cannot say more than that and risk things more. She says as the two of them look at the espada like she grew a second head as they soon shook it off. Do not worry, I will not harm Naruto, she says, having a feeling what was on the girl's mind. Naruto? You said Naruto? Asked a little kid who stood across the street and walks over. We did, and who are you, you little shy-ow, she began only to be smacked in the back of the head by Karen, who could already see the curse coming from a mile away. She didn't want to have to deal with angry people because Tayuya couldn't control her mouth. We are looking for Naruto Uzumaki. I had found some of his family and wished to introduce them to one another, Tear says, stepping forward to the small child, he around 12 or so from what she can guess as she looks down at the boy. You sure? Aniki had blonde hair, he says, rubbing the back of his head as he looked at the two of them. I will beat you, senseless brat. I am a damn Uzumaki. Tayuya yells at the little kid before being smacked again by Karen. Ow, damn it, stop hitting me or I will drown you in the damn river below. She says as the little kid raises his hands. Alright. My name is Inari, I'll take you over to my mom's place, it is getting pretty late, he says as he motions for them to follow. What are your names? He asks, putting his fingers behind his head, much how he had seen Naruto do that many years prior, and he supposed it stuck with him at this point. My name is Tear Harable, this is Ta Yuya and Karen Uzumaki, she says, introducing them as he nods at this. Well, good to meet you girls, I guess, my house isn't too far from here. Thank you for your hospitality, Inari-kun, Karen says with a smile, she says before hitting Ta Yuya in the ribs. Oh yeah, thanks Gaki. Naruto and the others were currently following Kakashi's Ninken as they followed the scent left behind by what they only assumed was the second Akatsuki member. Kurasuba and Sui-Fong following close behind him as Sui-Fong's eyes often traveled to the bloodthirsty woman who paid no attention to the midget with emotional problems, as Kurasuba calls her. Good lord, he needed to get them to fix their issues eventually, or it will cause issues, as he kept focused dead ahead. Beside him was Temari, whose eyes often traveled to Naruto and smiles. Hey Naruto, I don't think I've ever said this, she began, which causes Naruto to look at her curiously. But thank you for everything you've ever done for me and my family, she says as she decides to be cheeky and stepped next to him and gave him a kiss on the cheek, which causes Sui-Fong to stumble on one of the branches and almost fall to the floor below as Kurasuba laughs at her stumbling. What's wrong, midget? Not as secure in your relationship as you think you are, she calls out as Sui-Fong growls before they continued. Don't look too much into it, Naruto, I have my eyes on someone else, but still. Thank you, she smiles, and Naruto nods. Well, you didn't have to thank me like that, but you're welcome, Temari, he says with a smile as they continued their trek and tracking down the other Akatsuki members, though he of course already knew where they were. The question was if Sasori didn't already decide to hightail it back to wherever their base of operations was. He looked down as he remembered Nagato and Conan. No. He wanted to save them this time. He was family and she was one of his master's students. He wanted to show them that world peace was indeed possible, that people could understand one another. He mentally sighed as he had no idea how to go about this, besides drawing pain once more to Konoha, which is something he didn't want to do. He would have to talk to Kisuke about any ideas, or perhaps even going to Jiraiya, worst case scenario, but at the moment he had to focus on the task at hand. Butting Sasori to make sure he didn't make another attempt on Gaara's life. Next would be Orochimaru and Kabuto if he remembered correctly, except this time he won't be losing control. He will show him exactly what a captain of the 2nd Division can do. Though depending on how things went he would have to pull out his Shikai. He doubted he would have to pull out his Bankai on him. He came back to reality when he saw something, and it was Itachi Uchiha standing in the middle of the road as he motions for them to stay back. Itachi Uchiha, I'm surprised to see you here without your partner, Naruto says as the others spread out, his eyes meeting the Sharingan, smiling as he knew how to counteract most of the Sharingan by this point. Uzumaki. What a surprise. I don't suppose you will come peacefully, he says as Naruto snorts as he takes a step forward, slipping off his Haori to the floor and grips his Zanpakuto. Yeah, no, I'll take care of him, guys. Are you sure, Naruto? Asks Sakura worriedly as Sui-Fong and Kurasuba by now had taken a step back, wanting to give their master room to fight. I'm ready, just step back and don't worry about me, alright? He asks as he looks over to Sakura and smiles before his gaze came back to Itachi, who stood there. He of course knew it was a clone, but decided not to say anything as he knew this would be a good marker of when he had to fight the real deal. Though he wondered where the real one was at the moment as the others eventually stepped back to watch the fight as Naruto drew his Zanpakuto and aimed it at Itachi. You've picked up Kenjutsu, Naruto-kun, he said as he unseals a standard katana as Naruto smirks at this as he looks at the Uchiha. I've done more than just pick up Kenjutsu, Itachi, I've become stronger than you can possibly imagine, he says as he closes his eyes and lets out a breath before smirking. One thing I've learned and mastered in Iron Country under the Fawn family is a technique called flash step, allow me to educate you, he says, taking a step forward, then another, then in a flash he was gone, Itachi doing the same as he used his standard speed, holding his blade in hand. Clang. 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 The sound of blade meeting blade could be heard through the clearing as the others watch in awe, Sui-Fong holding on to the Haori as Kurasuba watches on, almost bored since it wasn't her fighting as she used a sharpening sword to go over her blade. Sakura and Temari were barely able to keep up with their speed, but Kakashi had no issues following along. When did he get so fast? Sakura asks in amazement as her eyes travel to wherever they stopped for their blades to clash once more. He was with Jiraiya-sama for years, Sakura remember. Kakashi says as his eyes followed, watching as Naruto was able to match the speed of Itachi, though he knew something felt off about Itachi, but quite couldn't put his finger on it, and it was bugging him to no end. Naruto knew that the clone of Itachi was only getting warmed up as he had yet to pull any jutsus from his ass. His hands in practiced motion as he raised his sword to block yet another strike before he went for a strike of his own, and Itachi blocking it just like he did moments ago. He wasn't stupid, he knew that the only reason Itachi was there was to test him and report back, unlike last time who was there to delay him, so that they could distract and extract the Biju from Gaara. No. Now it was to get a read from him and report back to the others as he looks at him as their blades continue to clash, sliding off one another and deflecting or bouncing, as one couldn't get an opening as Itachi, seeing it was senseless to continue attacking Naruto with the sword, jumped back, Naruto barely missing a strike before he did a hand sigh. Fire style. Fireball jutsu. He calls out as he blew out a rather large flame ball at the Jinchuriki, who grinned as he took a step back, holding out his hand, muttering an incantation as he closed his eyes for a moment before he yelled the last words. Back at number 81. Danki calls out and a split second later, a barrier materialized in front of him as the fireball exploded off it before the barrier came down and grins, lowering his hand as Itachi had stopped across the clearing from him, looking at Naruto dead in the eyes as he was processing this information. You've learned something new as well, Naruto-kun. I don't suppose you'll indulge me how it works, he asks as Naruto snorts, blade still in hand. You'd have better luck at making Kakashi drop his porn book habit than me telling you jack shit, he says as Itachi nods, causing Sakura, Temari and Karasuba to let out a loud ha, gripping the blade in his hand once more before they were at it once more, blade against blade. Damn it, Naruto, just release your Shikai and be done with this already. Calls out Karasuba, who looked absolutely bored at the one not being able to fight at the moment. If he wanted, he could let her gut the Uchiha right then and there, but at the moment she didn't let him, and it infuriated her. Fine, he yells out, keeping up with Itachi with his blade. Clang. 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 Nami no Kuni. Well, it's good that Naruto-kun has family members. I remember him telling us that he was all alone, no one waiting at home for him, Tsunami said as she poured them tea, smiling at the two redeeds as she puts down the teapot for them to pour themselves more when they were finished with the cup. Well, it was Tear-sama that told us we had family, so we really didn't have a choice, Karen says with a smile as she picks up the cup and takes a sip with a soft hum of content. She needed a good tea, and it seemed Tsunami made a good one, not that she was complaining at all, as she looks at Tayuya, who picks up her own tea and drinks it as well. You don't want some tea, Harable-san? Tsunami asked her. Without replying, Tear pulled up her zipper on her cloak to reveal the bone that was on her body and shakes her head. No thank you, but as you can see, I cannot drink it. She says as the three women marvel at the bone that was across her face and upper chest, as Tayuya then sees the chest size before looking down at her own and grumbling about lucky bitches under her breath before looking away with a small huff as this causes Harable to chuckle lightly. I gain sustenance in other ways. I shall leave it at that, was all she said as Tsunami nods. Do you miss it? Food? Asks Karen, to which Tear nods before zipping her jacket back up once more, noting that the three on her breast was gone, showing her servitude to the man she now despises was gone, as that brings her some measure of peace thankfully. I do, but it is like describing color to a blind man to me. I can smell it, yes, I can touch food and hear the food being made, but cannot taste it. She explains as the two of them nod at this. Anyway, moving on, what would you do with Naruto-kun? Tsunami asks the two as they look at each other for a long moment. Not really thinking about it at the moment, as they then turn back to Tsunami as Tayuya finally speaks up. Well, we haven't thought about it. We thought most of our clan had been wiped out, so in all honesty, we are just going with the flow at the moment, she says as Tear snorts lightly. Originally she only asked them to lead her to Konohagakure, but in truth, they kind of grew on her. It had almost been a day since she had met the two of them, and she was starting to see herself as a mentor, they as her new Frachians, though she hasn't offered to train them just yet, but now that she feels a sisterly bond with them, she just might do that. Well, I'm sure you will figure it out, Tsunami says as she picks up the dirty dishes and goes to wash them with a soft hum, as Tear looks at Karen for a long moment. She had said they were close to Konoha by this point, so they could relax here for a couple days. Parent, Tear calls out as she looks up from her tea at the matcha-skinned woman. You had picked up some blades from those nin, correct? She asks as this got Karen curious as to where she was going with this and nods. Yeah? Would you like to teach you? Both of you? She asks as this causes Karen to cough on the tea she was sipping as she looks at her. Why would you teach us? She asked Tear, who closed her eyes and listened to what they had to say. You both remind me of some people I knew. Perhaps it's nostalgia, perhaps it's wanting to be a mentor, perhaps it's friendship. Regardless, I wish to teach you the blade. Would you allow me that? She asks them as Karen and Tayuya looked at each other for a moment before Karen nods. Initially they just saw her as a jailer, but Tear had treated them otherwise. As the day went on, they saw her as a big sister. Even if it had been only a day. Life was strange. Alright, well, be happy to learn under you, Harable-sama. Back with Naruto and company. Naruto sighs in content as he slides his sword back into his sheath with a small click as it fully closed and smiled at this. He was confident that he could take Itachi when the time came, pain as well. He looked down at the now deceased clone as he walks over to it and used his foot to look at the face more fully and shakes his head. The clone Kakashi said as he looks at the body. Quite realistic too, I couldn't distinguish it besides the feeling I had, Kakashi said with a sigh and rubs the back of his head. Yeah. I had the same feeling. He didn't have the same feeling as the first time I had faced Itachi, but anyway. We should get going if we want to catch Sasori. He says as Sui-Fong walks up to him and offers his Haori, which he took and kissed the top of her head before slipping it on. Just as they were about to take off, however, Karasuba walks up to Naruto and grabs his Haori before pulling him into a deep kiss, her wings sprouting from the kiss before she let go. Don't think you can't just put a show like that on for me and not expect me to get hot and bothered, Karasuba says with a smirk, which the others were looking at her in absolute shock but otherwise said nothing. Bloodthirsty hound, Sui-Fong mutters under her breath as Naruto sighs, as he had to make sure to bring out his ultimate weapon that he had used when he was training those in the second division. At the moment, however, they had bigger concerns as he turns to Kakashi. Your dogs still have the scent? He asks as Kakashi nods and motions for them to follow, as the ninja dog had still been close by before they began to take off after Sasori once more. Sakura slowed down to match the speed of Karasuba, absolutely curious about her. She thought Naruto was dating Sui-Fong, and then this woman comes into the picture. Truth be told, this just brought up much more questions than answers in terms of Sakura. So, you're Karasuba, right? How do you know Naruto? She asks as Karasuba, remembering the lie that Naruto had told her, raised her eyebrow at Sakura. I was a part of the Fawn family, however I came from a different family altogether than Sui-Fong, so we have a small connection at best. I had met Naruto on the training trip along with Sui-Fong, however, as you no doubt see what kind of person I am in battle, I challenged him to a spar and he bested me, knocked me on my ass, and broke my sword like it was candy crackers, she says as Sakura was confused. And what about the wings? She asked as Karasuba shrugs, not really caring about other people knowing since she just cared for two things, her Ashikabi and the love of battle. Otherwise, she cared little what others thought of her. That is the variation of my Zanpakuto, unlike what Naruto-kun and Midget-chan has, my power isn't in the blade itself, but on my back in the form of a seal. I can release my power in one of two ways, in the form of a Naruto, or in the terms of a kiss from my Ashikabi-sama. She explains, almost bored with this, as Sakura was just even more curious. Look, I don't know how it works, okay Pinky, I just got the gist of it. If you want more answers, then go ask Mayuri or something, she says with a huff, and this causes Sakura nods. Well, thanks for explaining anyway. Would you be joining us back in Konoha? If that's what my Ashikabi wants, then I will certainly do that, she says as Sakura nods, as she then looks at Naruto, smiling at how much he had matured and how grown he is now. Not even with just relationship he now has, but how he is as a person. Kakashi too was looking at his now former student with a smile behind his mask. Yes, he had seen him grow at the training a few days ago, but now he had a good idea of what kind of person he was. Damari was smiling as well. The man who had saved her brother time and time again was a ray of sunshine in the dark, helping those who needed help. If she wasn't seeing someone at the moment, she was sure that she would snatch him up quick. He was the perfect boyfriend. Sweet and caring, strong and relentless when protecting people. Hey. She calls out to Sui-Fong once more, as this caused her to look back and turn. You're lucky you know that. She says as Sui-Fong was wondering where this was coming from before turning back to Naruto and smiling, a faint blush on her face, and nods. I know I am, was all she said. She didn't have too much longer to think, as they all had finally stopped somewhere, and it was a river with a large boulder with a seal attached to it. The scent stops here, Kakashi says as he looks up at the boulder and sees the seal atop of it. He cursed, knowing that the seal was a 5-part seal, where they had to pull the other seals at the same time, though the others will no doubt be trapped. But now I can wet my blade, Karasuba says as she unsheathes her blade, ready to destroy the tag and the boulder behind it. Wait. We can't destroy it, we have to, Kakashi began, only for Karasuba to look at him in turn. Like hell, those things want to take my Ashikabi-sama and it'll put their heads on pikes on the bridge, and if one seal is stopping me, then it'll destroy everything around the tag. You battle-thirsty hound. We can't just rush in there. Sui-Fong yells at her and grabs Karasuba's weapon, preventing her from destroying the tag. We don't know how many is in there. They have to know we're coming. Hell, Ashikabi-sama killed one a couple minutes ago, so the element of surprise is gone, you damn emotionally stunted midget. She roars back, ready to yank her blade back and remove the woman's fingers, as her hands whiten from gripping her blade so hard. That's enough. Naruto yells at the both of them and separates the two with his hands. If you haven't noticed, we are in enemy territory with possibly reinforcements on their way, since they had just lost a member. We can be at each other's throats later. But at the moment we have to hurry up and finish the one behind this boulder. I am a seal master thanks to my mother's side, so I can override this. I expected better from both of you, he says, looking at the two with harsh glares. Ah, you're right. I'm sorry, Naruto-sama, Sui-Fong says, her head down. She should have known better to let her emotions get the better of them, as he said, in the middle of enemy territory. Yeah, sorry, Ashikabi-sama, she says, putting her sword away. But you are both important to me. I hate it when you fight like this, but I know I cannot force you both to get along. At the very least, if you're going to fight, do it when we aren't on a mission, he says as Sui-Fong and Karasuba nods. Let me see about removing the seal, Naruto says as he pushed Chakra to his feet and made his way up the boulder and looks at it as he pulls a scroll from his pants and pulls out some ink and paper. He had clones go over Fuinjutsu scrolls to get a refresher on what he had learned in the last life he had here, but as expected from Aizen Uzumaki, he had picked it up almost instantly. He was murmuring to himself as his eyes moved from the seal on the boulder to the paper occasionally as he was doing a cancellation seal, specifically tailored to the tag that was keeping them from ending Sasori's life. That's right, you know, Temari says, crossing her arms as she watches Naruto work. But that's all I have to say on the matter, it seems he's done, she says as she watches Naruto put the seal on the one on the boulder and nods as it zaps before breaking as he nods in content. Jumping off of it, he looks at Sakura. You want to do the honors? He asks her as she smirks and rolls her neck and tightens the glove on her hand as Chakra surrounds it before she jumps up. Ah, she yells out and slams her fist into the boulder as it was pulverized from the amount of strength put into it, as all that was left was no bigger than a baseball as it exploded and crumbled or flew apart. Karasuba, Sui-Fong, stay out here, keep an eye out for any reinforcements, me and the rest of us will handle Sasori. Understood, Naruto-sama, Sui-Fong says, still ashamed of her previous behavior, but no less focused on the task at hand as Naruto looked at Sakura, Kakashi and Temari as they stepped inside as they saw Sasori standing there. So the QB Jinchuriki graces me with his presence. And the sister Tagara, Sasori says, his tail moving behind him. We're going to end you, Sasori, Temari says, pulling out her fan as Sakura watches on as he chuckles to himself before hunching down further and pulls off his mask, revealing it was a puppet before he opens his mouth and began to fire poison-coated senbon at them. Scatter. Kakashi yells out as he pulls a kunai and began to deflect shot after shot of the kunai, now glad that he had told Sakura to prepare for poison. Damn too many. Naruto says, not having been in this fight as he deflected the senbon with his blade. Ami, this is pissing me off. Temari yells as she continued to swing her fan to deflect the senbon as well. Push into him, he can't attack us all. Naruto yells, getting some haste as they began to step forward, as they did, causing Sasori to step back and change targets often, not wanting to be rushed down and broken, his tail moving, keeping them at bay when they did end up getting too close. Eventually they, still split, managed to widen his attention further. Sakura now. Break that puppet. Kakashi yells out, which, just like she did with the boulder, jumps up, Chakra coating her fist once more and brought it down on the puppet as it explodes with a shower of splinters as she jumps back, not wanting to get a surprise from any tricks the puppeteer had on them. It was then she saw something move from underneath the clothing that the puppet wore before whatever it had removed them and revealed a redeeted shinobi, a smirk on his face. You destroyed my outer puppet. I would be impressed if I wasn't so annoyed with how you destroyed my work of art, he says as he rummaged in his cloak before pulling out a scroll as it lowers down, revealing a seal before out came yet another puppet. I'm really starting to dislike my brother's style of combat, Temari says with a groan. You're telling me, Naruto says as he watches it began to attack Sakura with its hands before it opened up and revealed hundreds if not thousands of more hands as it began to attack her. Kakashi, stick with Sakura, me and Temari will go after the puppeteer. He calls out as him and Temari nods and began to rush. I'm not as helpless as the other puppeteers. He yells as he summons yet another puppet and began to attack the two, this time with spinning blades and swords as Naruto groaned, deflecting the blade as he made sure not to get a nick on him, as he knew they were poison-coated as Temari was doing the same with her closed fan, knowing that if she opened it, it would be absolutely torn to shreds. Sakura. Kakashi yells out, watching her get poisoned as he tightens the mask on his face, holding his breath as he grabs a kunai and breaks her free from their grasp before taking a step back. Damn it, we can't do this, we have to end Sasori or he'll just wear us down with poison, and Senbon, Temari says, managing to get a good shot at the puppet and destroying it with her fan as she took a step back and caught her breath as Naruto was currently cross-bladed with the main puppet he seemed to be using. But I wouldn't kill to have one of the other captains here with me, he murmured as he, with one swift strike, destroyed the blade and kicking the puppet away. Kakashi, seeing that Naruto was keeping the puppet distracted, tended to Sakura who had been severely poisoned as he cursed his luck, he had gotten careless with Sakura and now she was paying the price for it. He tried to remove the poison as best as he could, but he was no medic nin. "I can take over," he heard a woman say, not stopping but looking up. He saw a woman with a braid on the front of her body, wearing similar clothes, and a kind smile behind her face. "You help with Naruto-kun, let me rid the poison of this girl's body," she says as she moves over to Sakura as her hand began to glow. "Who are you?" he asks, watching as he stands, able to at least trust her for now if Karasuba and Sui-Fong had let her into the cave. "My name is Captain Unohana. Now go. Help Naruto-kun, I can take over," she says as he nods. He rushed back into the fray where Naruto was now defending himself from this grey sand-like material, his breath labored from taking a hit earlier, but otherwise he and Temari seemed fine. Seeing Kakashi join back into the fray, he then had an idea as he smirks, wiping the blood from his mouth. "Oi. Kakashi, I'm going to make an opening for you. Hit him with your Rikiri," he says with a grin. "Got Naruto," he says as he began to channel chakra into his hand, the lightning come off of it as he watches Naruto began to do a chant once more. Back at number 81. Dank. Back at number 81. Dank. He calls out, and two barriers, much like before, had formed. This time, it made a corridor, right towards Sasori as he charged. Sasori, seeing this, panicked as he sent the black substance to him. "I don't think so." Temari yells out using her wind jutsu with her fan to knock it away, leaving Kakashi with the opening he needs, his tunnel vision kicking in and in one swift motion, buried his hand right into the chest of Sasori as his eyes widen at this, his eyes traveling down to the hand buried in his chest. "Damn it," he murmured. Naruto sighs in content as he steps through the village gates once more as he gave a thumbs up to the infamous Eternal Gate guards. Bunch of lazy asses if he was honest, but he knows that they knew they were good at that, so he didn't bother them too much. He runs a hand through his hair as he looks over to Unohana, who was walking just behind with Sakura talking to her like an excited student as she spoke with her. The one thing that bothers him is he knew her past. He knew what she was doing before they had got sent back in time and wondered what she will do now, with her objective now gone so to speak. Will she look for another successor? Will she go on as a husk of her former self or will she forget her past life? Will she forget Yuichiro Unohana and now forever stay as Retsu Unohana? Or will she look for a successor here? He worried that she would revert. But ultimately that was her decision and her decision alone to make. No one would be able to match Kenpachi now. Her purpose of grooming him gone. Too many questions and not enough answers as he slowed down as they made their way to the Hokage Tower. "Sakura, can you give me and Captain Unohana a second?" he asks as Sakura nods and speeds up to catch up with the others, they ahead of them as he sighs to himself and looks at her. "Ichiro, what will you do now?" he asks her. She knows exactly what he meant as the warm glowing eyes that others had associated her as faded and now was cold and serious, calculating as she looks over to Naruto. "I don't know. Perhaps Ichiro will fade. Replaced by Retsu. I had put my blade down to nurture Captain Zaraki to succeed me. But now I don't have that," she explains as he nods. "Perhaps it is best if Ichiro disappear forever," she says as she continues walking alongside the captain of the 2nd Division. "Do whatever you feel is best, Unohana. If you want my recommendation, however, you will be remembered for your healing touch more than your blade skills. But that is just me," he says, slipping his hand into his pockets. Karasuba, who had been listening in, eyes widen when she heard the name of Yuichiro, but does nothing as Kakashi, who saw her, raised an eyebrow and wondered what this meant. But otherwise, didn't say anything as they continued their way to the Hokage Tower. "I don't wish to be remembered," Yuichiro tells him as he nods. "I wish to feel the rush of battle again. But I will take your words into consideration, Naruto. You have given me quite a bit to think about." "You're welcome, Captain Unohana. At the very least you'll have competition in the healing arts in the form of my godmother," he says with a chuckle as they continued until they finally made it into the Hokage Tower as they made their way up to the floor, bypassing the secretary as there was a knock on the door. "Bachan, we're back," he calls out, taking one step through the door before another paperweight bounced off his head as he fell onto his back as he groans and rubs his head with a small whimper at this as Sui-Fong, who had gotten used to this, picks up Naruto with a smile. "I told you to stop calling me that, brat," she grumbles out as she watched them all walk in as she raised an eyebrow at the two newcomers before looking at Naruto once more. "Report then," she says as Naruto takes a step forward as his usual smile moves into a professional look as he looks at her. Team 7 was en route to Sunagakure, a friend from Iron Country managed to stop and kill Deidara of Iwa before they could manage to take the 4th Kizikage and brought him back to full health with the aid of Chunin Sakura Haruno. After determining the location of the 2nd Akatsuki member, Sasori of the Red Sands, and recruiting Karasuba of the Fawn family, the one who saved Kizikage-sama, tracked down Sasori and eliminated him as well. Captain Unohana had managed to revive Chunin Sakura and had agreed to come back with us to Konohagakure since I have met with her before. Naruto says, giving out his report as much as he had done when he was captain and having to be professional when he was giving reports to the head captain. Both have shown interest in joining Konohagakure. Tsunade nods as she motions for Naruto to stand aside. Karasuba stepped forward, she said as the woman did so, and looks at the woman with an almost bored expression as Tsunade looks at her. Name, age and specialty and relations if any, Tsunade said as Karasuba nods. Karasuba, 18, Kenjutsu, and I am my Ashikaga Sekirei, she says, thumbing over to Naruto, who had the decency to at the very least look sheepish, but knew that he would tell her what she needed to know. She was his mother and all but blood at this point. Very well. We shall test your prowess once I am done here, is that acceptable? Karasuba nods as Tsunade pulls out a headband and lays it on the desk. Nothing is official until I sign the paperwork, but take this for now, she says as Karasuba steps forward and takes the black headband before taking a step forward. Captain Unohana, correct? Same questions as your friend there. Retsu Unohana, 40, and I am a medical specialist under the Fan family, and I currently have no relations otherwise, she says as Tsunade nods and smiles, glad to see that there was women who took the medical field seriously, as she pulls out yet another black headband and gives it to Unohana, who bows and takes it before stepping back. Good. Team 7, you go rest, I'll get these two mentally and physically tested, then I'll consider what our next move is regarding the Akatsuki, she says as the rest of them nod and filed out, leaving the two alone. With Naruto a couple days later. Naruto sighs as he ran a hand through his hair once more as he sat at the training ground once more as he was panting. He decided he had wanted to train alone for a bit, leaving Sui-Fong to do what she wanted for a couple hours. It seemed the others has acclimatized well enough that they could be independent. Unohana had been sent to the hospital to work there, where she was almost immediately compared to Tsunade for the miracle worker that she was, pulling off things that most doctors couldn't. Karasuba of course was currently sparring as well, though it seems she had taken to a liking of one Anko Mitarashi, which, to him, again, wasn't surprising given the similar natures of the two women. Kasuke of course kept them supplied with what they needed when they needed it, and Yuruchi being his little bodyguard in a sense, making sure that no one attacked him, not that Urahara couldn't defend himself. Sui-Fong of course was his bodyguard almost 24/7. Of course, he allowed her some room of independence as well as this allowed her to go out and make some friends, especially in the form of one Kurina Yuhi and Yugao. He could have sworn he saw Tsume once or twice, but decided it wasn't worth worrying about. He panted as he calmed down and looks at the destroyed bark of the tree and nods in satisfaction as he had been training his physical conditioning as he wiped the sweat off his face with a towel and pops his back. He had this itch in the back of his mind for some time now and truthfully, he had no idea where it came from. Regardless, he put it to the back of his mind when he felt a familiar chakra energy close by and closes his eyes, focusing on it before turning to face it. You can come out, Hinata, you didn't have to go hiding, he tells her as he heard a small yep before she eventually steps out from behind a tree, her hands in front of her in a bashful manner as he could only chuckle. It was one of his few regrets that he couldn't do in his past life, was answer Hinata's confession, and now, here she was, standing in front of him once more. And here I was thinking you had forgotten all about me, he joked since he had seen the others before they had gotten the chance to talk. I wouldn't, she says with a blush and stutter as this causes him to smile wider and take a step forward. I know, Hinata, I'm only joking, come over here, I have some lunch you can share with me, he says to her as she nods, blushing further as he had a seat at one of the nearby trees as he pulls out a small scroll and brings out two lunches. Truthfully, he always packed two since he always knew that Sui-Fong would be close by and she wouldn't leave his side to go eat until he was eating or it was nighttime. She was devoted as a garden lover, he gave her that. He just wished she acted more like a lover, damn it. Hinata walks over and has a seat next to him as he gave her one of the bentos as he looks at her a moment and thinks at how to approach this topic as they began to eat in silence as he then decides to go with, ah hell, and goes for it. Hinata, I know you have feelings for me, don't pass out, I want you to hear what I have to say, he says to her as she nods as she fights to do just that, not wanting to disappoint her crush as he rubs the back of his head as he continued to eat before taking another gulp of his food. I appreciate the feelings, Hinata. I really do. But I'm not confident right now to respond to your feelings. As you may have heard, I am already in a relationship with someone, no doubt from Kiba, he explains as she nods, looking down at her food as tears began to well up in her eyes as he reaches out and pats her back lightly. I'm not going to deny your feelings because you were one of the few people who gave me the strength to continue in my younger years. Give me time to think about what I want to say, alright? He asks her as she nods, glad that he at least thought of her. What about the others? She says, already having seen Karasuba and how close she was to Naruto and how absolutely terrifying she was. When I give you an answer we can talk to Sui-Fong. Karasuba I know won't leave me regardless of what I say, Sui-Fong is devoted however, so we may need to talk to her. But this is if I say yes, Hinata. I care for you a great deal and I want you to be happy too. He says to her as he puts down his food, having already finished it. I know and I appreciate it. I'll do anything to be with you, and if that means I have to show them I am worthy, then so be it, she says as he laughs at this. He knew Hinata was much stronger than she looked at times, and she would no doubt beat her way into their little relationship if she wanted to, but didn't out of respect for him and his feelings. Again, that's if I say yes, Hinata, I don't want to get your hopes up. He says to her as she nods and continues eating with a small, satisfied look on her face. This was certainly much closer than she had been 3 years ago, and while it may not be ideal, she thought it was a better alternative to losing him altogether. Though no doubt Sui-Fong, from what she saw, would beat her in a fight. If he said yes, she would fight tooth and nail for their relationship to work. If he said no, she would be heartbroken but understand and admire him from afar and still be friends. Training ground number 8. Karasuba snarls, her blade in hand as she looks at the destroyed tree as she pants lightly. She had gotten used to this new land with relative ease, the others as well as she adapted quite well. She calmed her breathing as she flicks her wrist and began to sharpen her blade once more as she sat down against the stump of the now destroyed tree and nods in satisfaction. Her edge alignment was getting better and she was able to strike even more cleanly than before as her mind wandered to what her Ashikabi had said earlier. About Captain Unohana. She had spoken to Captain Kenpachi, saying that there was few people he admired more than he did the captain of the 4th Division. Saying that she was the only one that was able to keep up with him, and of course when her Ashikabi had confirmed it, she knew she had one thing to do to get stronger. She had to challenge the woman. She sighs as she looks down the blade for any nicks before sharpening it a few more times and nods, standing up when she heard the clicking of shoes on cobble. Ah, Karasuba, you're here. And here I was hoping for a quiet day, Captain Unohana says with a motherly smile as she held a small bento box in her hands as Karasuba turns to face the other captain. Captain Unohana, she says as she slides her sword back into her sheath as he closes with a small click. I had heard what my captain said about you, she says as she raises an eyebrow at the bloodthirsty woman. I believe you may be mistaken, dear, she says, not wanting this to go any further at the moment as she walks over to the bench and lies down her food before turning to face her. No, Captain Zaraki and Ashikabi-sama all but confirmed it for me, she says, taking a step to her as Unohana's hands move to her Zanpakuto as she recognized the look in her eyes. It's the same look she had when she was Yuichiro Unohana. And I want you to step fight me, Karasuba yells before launching herself at the woman, drawing her sword in one swift motion and moving to strike the woman only to be blocked by the sheath from Unohana. I am a healer, said Retsu, but clearly able to hold back the strength of the bloodthirsty woman before Kara stepped back, she snarling before going for another strike, and just like before, she had blocked her blade with her Zanpakuto. Fight me, Ichiro Unohana. Karasuba roars as she takes another swipe at the old captain, as Unohana blocks every single one with ease, as she showed the much younger Shinigami that she was still indeed Yuichiro under the persona of Retsu, and no doubt vice versa. If you know my name, then you know that I can smear you across the floor, Yuichiro says, her eyes going from a kind and motherly woman to her cold and calculating self once more. I don't care. She roars and takes another swipe at the woman as Unohana, at last, decides to draw her blade and for the first time in centuries, pulled her blade out to block another as her eyes met Karasuba's as she smiles. Why do you fight, Karasuba? For the thrill. She asks, this time deciding to go on the offensive. Clang. 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 I fight for the thrill. And my Ashikabi. She yells back as she had stumbled back from the last strike before righting herself and going back to striking the now bloodthirsty woman. Such conviction in your words. Very well. Show me what you can do, Karasuba of the 2nd Division. She says as they began to clash blades, metal against metal as strike against strike, they met, determined to fight, however there was a fly in the ointment. Neither of them had been taking this battle too seriously as of yet. Karasuba has yet to use her Naruto, and Unohana has yet to release her full power. Do not falter now or you will die, Karasuba. Leaving behind your precious Ashikabi-sama. Like hell. Clang. 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 Blades kept meeting as they fought, little by little they ramped up their battle, neither blade showing any sign of giving. Karasuba knew she would be outmatched eventually, she had heard the stories, but if she could fight against Captain Yuichiro Unohana, then that would give her the power to defeat any hollow, kill Aizen, and stand by her Ashikabi with a proud look in her eyes. That fire in your eyes, yes, Unohana smiles as she began to enjoy this battle once more. She would have to speak to Naruto about borrowing this one once a week or something. She was just as bloodthirsty as she was and quite strong too. Maybe she had another successor to pass on the name Kenpachi too. She had to test her first. She had to make sure that Karasuba was worth training, worth it. With Tear and company. Good, keep your blade up, react at a moment's notice, Tear said as she was currently sparring with Karen, who seemed to be able to pick up the blade quite well. She had wondered if it had to do anything with her, or if she simply had some innate talent for it. She would have to look into the Uzumaki line later, but for the moment, she was doing a great job at this, as their blades clashed. Though at a much slower pace than Tyr had been accustomed to. She was used to the high reaction times of seasoned veterans, but there was something nice at being able to teach someone. Her Frachians were already well trained and could defend themselves with ease, but there seemed to be something special about teaching the next generation instead of simply using them as subordinates. Yes, Sensei, Karen says, already quite winded as she was more of a healer with her special ability than she was a swordsmaster, but she wanted to learn so that she was able to defend herself should the need arise, and at the moment from the look Tyr was giving her. She was doing quite well, but that didn't mean she could get complacent as she knew that the matcha-skinned woman was no pushover when it came to swords. Hey, when we going to Konoha, Taiyuya says as by now her legs were completely functional and ready for ninja work as she leaned against her own blade. Taiyuya would get something more suited for her, but at the very least Tyr was teaching them the basics of how to fight. We should head out soon, Tyr says as she made another strike to Karen, who was only getting better at blocking her blade or deflecting it to the side as she treated the blade that Harable had as a normal blade. Unlike if she was in combat, she would use the hollowness of the blade to her teacher's disadvantage. Well, hopefully they don't kill us on sight, Taiyuya says with a grumble, as she knew that if pineapple-haired one saw her, she would be ratted out almost immediately, and she personally didn't want to end up inside a TNI headquarters. She was in Uzumaki, damn it. They won't. I will not let them, especially since we know Uzumaki-san, she says as she was mentally prepared for everything. Worst comes to worst, she would take the fall and let these two go. Sorry if that doesn't make me feel any better, Taiyuya says to her older sister figure by this point, as Tyr rolls her eyes in amusement as she blocks yet another strike. Alright, I believe we are done for the day. Taiyuya is right, we cannot stay here forever, we have to make our way to Konoha. We must, as Yui say, face the music, she says as the two nods as they made their way inside, putting their blades either on their back or on their hips. They began to pack their things once more as Tyr was looking at the two redeeds as she was lost in thought for a moment. Ryo, for your thoughts. Karen asks as she puts the sword back into her scroll as Tyr looks for a moment longer before speaking up. You are both Uzumaki yet are not blood related immediately, neither are you to Uzumaki Naruto, so this leads me to believe it is a clan. Can you tell me about them, Karen? She asks curiously as Karen pauses before nodding. Let's get going and I'll tell you on the road. We should at least say bye, she says as Tyr and Taiyuya nod as they bid the woman and her family farewell before they began on the road to Konoha once more. Taiyuya still carrying her blade on her waist instead of Karen, who wasn't confident in her blade skills to rely on it to defend herself. From what my mother told me, the Uzumaki clan were fierce warriors, great with the sword and the art of sealing, so much so that they were feared by the other nations. They were renowned for their red hair and their skills with a blade, but they mostly lived in one location, Yuzushi Agakur, she says as Tyr nods, she had seen it on the map. What happened? She asked curiously as she was now curious about who they were. The Third Shinobi War happened. The one thing about the Uzumaki clan is their seal work were to be feared and kept the invaders out for a long time, but it took the combination of 3 armies and a few smaller armies to defeat most of the Uzumaki clan. For every one Uzumaki kill, we killed 3 of them. It was a hollow victory to Iwa, Kumo and Kiri, we made it hurt. It was a Pyrrhic victory. At least, that's what my grandmother told me given the fact that I haven't gone there. I've been wanting to make a trip but well I was with, as Taiyuya calls him, Snake Funker. She says as Taiyuya snorts, not used to Karen swearing as she does. Not that she minded. When it happens, she knew it was called for. You all sound like formidable warriors, she says. Damn right, when someone wants to kill us, we may go down, but damned if we don't go down swinging and give them a black eye. Taiyuya says with a smirk. Good to know. Hokage's office next day. Good, you're finally all here, Tsunade says as she watches Team 7 file in along with Team 8 and 10, though to be fair, some were chunin and were simply called in as Tsunade was looking over the file she had in her hand as she hums. We got a mission, Bachan. Naruto asks her as he puts his hands behind his head and slips into a relaxed stance as she nods grimly. You do. Recently Sakura and Kakashi had managed to get a tidbit of information from Sasori of the Red Sands. I had Jiraiya check it out first before I sent teams to this mission, but it seems to have been well placed from what he told me, he tells them, as she looks at the photos of the bridge before closing it. Sasori had a spy within Orochimaru's hideout and he was planning to meet Sasori on the Tenchi Bridge to deliver some information. She explains as she offers the file over to Kakashi, who takes it and looks it over. So then what's our mission? Asks Shikamaru, who walks over and looks over the file as well as it seemed to be the information report from Jiraiya and his spying and recon of the area. Your mission, if you wish to accept it, is to take this information and hunt down Sasuke Uchiha, bring him back so that he is to stand trial, and he is a nuke nin, so he must, she says quickly to Sakura, who looked ready to say something about the trail, but then quieted down at this, knowing she was right. What if Orochimaru is there? Speaks up Shino. He had no inclination to be killed by the snake if at all possible, and he knew the sentiments were shared by the others. No doubt this is the reason they were all being sent on this mission, for a higher chance of success, should they do encounter either Sasuke or being able to flee with ease, should they encounter the white snake. This just meant they had a high priority mission and had to plan for it accordingly. Should you encounter Orochimaru, you are to either kill him or flee if you feel it is too much. This is not a suicide mission, as such I will send our newest medic, Retsu Anohana, with you to patch you up. I want 100% survival rate, or I will bring you guys back from the dead to beat on you, she says with a smile, as the others smile in turn. The will of fire burns bright in this generation, she told herself. You have 2 hours, I recommend you go prepare and discuss your plan of attack, but be smart about this, you understand. Dismissed, she says to them. Sui-Fong was happy for this mission if she were 100% honest. The bloodthirsty hound was currently at home recovering because she had the brightest idea of challenging Captain Anohana to a sword fight, and this led her to be cut up and bruised, but very much alive. To anyone who didn't know Anohana before she became Retsu would be surprised at what she did to Karasuba, but to her and Naruto, this wasn't really a surprise at all. She jumped from tree to tree as she then drifted her mind to the mission at the moment. They were to hunt down and capture a missing ninja and bring him back to face prosecution under the authority of the Hokage. It made sense, he was a former Konoha ninja after all. Of course, she also knew the significance of the fugitive to Naruto. He saw him as a brother in all but blood. He wanted to bring him back because of a promise he had made to Sakura on his first life here. She sighed lightly, a part of her wanted nothing more than to kill Sasuke and be done with it, but she knew it would cause a very deep rift in their relationship. Karasuba would probably do it. She shook her head and focused on the task at hand as she looked around to her teammates at the mission, as just like before, Naruto was the team lead. Tsunade seemed to place a great deal of trust into Naruto, which didn't surprise her, given the fact that he was her godson. What sort of resistance are we expecting? She heard Shikamaru speak up, a very strategically minded person from what she had deduced and rivaled even that blasted man in the candy shop. Urahara always got Naruto into trouble in one way or another, so this just caused to simply dislike the man. She was civil with him until he proved otherwise, but she wished that Naruto wouldn't associate with him. Sasuke, possibly Orochimaru and his henchmen, otherwise it could simply be Sasuke and some lackeys, Naruto said as they continued to jump from tree to tree, as he focused eyes ahead as Sui-Fong nods, having had these missions before in the past, a capture or assassination mission. So we have no idea until we arrive, then Ino asks as the others shake their head. They had a good idea what was going to happen, Jiraiya had confirmed the meeting, but something felt off as he ran his hand through his hair and kept jumping. We have no idea honestly, it could be anything, so please for the love of Kami stay alert and well come back alive, Naruto says, not bullshitting them honestly. He knows it's not what they wanted to hear, but it was something that needed to be said to them, and they understood the need to be honest, as that's what kept them alive, it was the honest truth. Do we know what we're going to learn off the spy at the very least? Kiba asks with a groan as he hated going into things blind. Being an Inyazuka, he always had better senses than most, so it allowed him to always have a better understanding at what was coming, but it also meant him and his family hated surprises. No idea, hopefully locations of bases and where Sasuke is, but the spy can't travel too far from the base, so even if what he gives us is minimal, we can follow him back to base. Naruto says as Shika nods at this as well, having come to the same conclusion at this. This is also very troublesome, Shika says as the others snort at this. It was, but they knew that they would bring back a friend at the very least, knowing that Naruto would do the same for them if the roles were reversed. How are you holding up, Sui-Fong-san? Asks Shino as his eyes, beneath his shades, traveled over to her who was currently lost in thought, but when she heard her name called she came back to reality and looked over at Shino and nods. I'm doing alright, Shino-san, don't worry about me, she says as the bug user nods at this, before his eyes focused forward and continued towards their destination as he sighs. When he got there, he'd have to scout around and make sure the spy wasn't followed for one reason or another. In all honesty, he had a very bad feeling about this mission, and he was sure the others did as well if their steely looks were anything to go by. At the moment, however, they simply focused on the task at hand, otherwise they'd be too bothered by stress. Tenchi Bridge, next day. I don't see anything so far, Hinata says as she was currently looking around with her Byakugan. They were all inside of the Tenchi Bridge, using special seals to mask their chakra made by Tenten and Naruto for this mission, able to be easily removed for quick combat, should the need arise. I can confirm, my bugs aren't coming into contact with anything, Shino says before he pauses as Hinata gasps at this and he goes rigid. Wait, my bugs are Hess here, he says as this causes the others to stiffen, hoping he wasn't who they thought it was, and before they knew it, someone had stepped out onto the bridge and it was a very familiar looking ninja from 3 years ago, Kabuto. This causes the others to grimace. Was he the spy, or did he kill the spy already and take his place to lure out the spy? Naruto however knew by now which one it was. He was fiercely loyal to Orochimaru and that he was just playing a ruse as he mentally sighs to himself. Plan? Shikamaru asks him as Naruto wanted to simply rush forward, but he couldn't be stupid about it. Last time, Yamato disguised themselves as Sasori. This time however, he didn't have anything to disguise them. He also knew if he waited too long that Kabuto would leave. It'll go out there as if I'm the spy under Sasori, see if he can give me any information, otherwise, be prepared for anything and everything. I don't trust this guy, I'm sure you guys don't either, he says as Shika's eyes widen before nodding. Really, he didn't have any other options at the moment as he looks at Naruto. The second he attacks you, it's the second we jump in, is that clear? He says as he nods in thanks before jumping down to the forest floor and steps to the bridge. Ah Naruto, I would say it's a pleasure to see you again, but I'd then be lying. I suppose you're here to demand where your precious Sasuke is? Kabuto asks with a smirk as Naruto kept his stoic look on his face as he steps forward before meeting him on the bridge. He knew who was watching as well. So, he at least decided to put on a show. I don't suppose you tell me and step out of my way? Naruto asks him as Kabuto smiles even wider at this, and it was at this point Naruto really wanted to punch this guy's lights out. You know I cannot do that Naruto, it would go against my master, he says, knowing Orochimaru was close by as he had to wait to give the signal to come and join them. If you're hoping to rile me up you'll have to try harder Kabuto. I didn't take you for a traitor though Kabuto. What's the catch? He asks him as he slips his hands into his pockets, showing a relaxed pose, but anyone who knew him knew he wasn't relaxed. His body tense and ready to react to any sort of attack. There is no catch. Truth be told, I gutted the spy and gave him to Orochimaru for testing, Kabuto says as Naruto's eyes looked at Kabuto with a bit of shock before sighing, and as if on cue at him saying his master's name, he appears next to Kabuto, his usual smile on his face as Naruto tenses up even further. He knew that he could match Orochimaru blow for blow, but at the moment, not including Kabuto as well. Quite right dear Naruto-kun, I made him an ice painting all over Odo's walls. I think your prisoner would be quite proud of it. Orochimaru says as his eyes harden at this as his hands move over to his Zanpakuto. So then you won't tell me where Sasuke is? I could lop off the head of your little lackey, it would no doubt kill me, given it'd be wide open, but I would take one thing from you, he tells Orochimaru as the snake man's hands digs into his pocket and retrieves something akin to a pill, as Naruto's eyes widen at this. He didn't. He wouldn't. But the rookies. Sui-Fong, who was watching from the back, gasps at this, she knew exactly what that was too. What is it? Kiba asks, the thing stunk, even from back here as he covers his nose, the other's eyes transfixed on what was in the man's hands. How did he get that? Sui-Fong whisper yells as Retsu walks over and outs a hand on the smaller woman's shoulder. Is it dangerous? Chaoji asks before Sui-Fong nods as she turns back to the oncoming fight, especially if he used that they would all be neck deep in. She had to do something, but couldn't move from the force at which Retsu held her back. With Naruto. You look like you recognize this Naruto. You see, I had gotten this from a rather curious benefactor, and the fact that you recognize this makes me smile, since what I'm about to do will make it all the more satisfying. Orochimaru says as he looks at the pill. Hollow bait Naruto said through gritted teeth as he couldn't simply take it as it would be far quicker for Orochimaru to destroy it. Quite right, I actually got the chance to study in a rancor as they called them, I believe. The key to eternal life wasn't this body, but theirs, he says as he smirks as he looks back at Naruto. Once I find a way to take over in a rancor, nothing will be able to stop me. And it'll be unstoppable. He says as he laughs before, in one swift motion, destroyed the hollow bait. What have you done? Naruto says before a second later. They all heard it. The telltale sign of a hollow. It's Hormone that put the shiver into any man as Naruto glares at Orochimaru. I'll kill you then. Naruto yells as he yanks his sword free from his scabbard and goes to slash at Orochimaru, only to be thrown back by a Zero and thrown into one of the trees behind him. That's when he saw it. That's when they all saw it, hollows appearing from portals all around them as he snarls. If you survive this Naruto-kun then maybe you'll be a good rival to Sasuke-kun, after all was all he said, as he and Orochimaru disappear as the others appear around him as he coughs hard. What is a hollow? You said it was bait for them, Shika asks as he heard the moan again, the others on edge as they had saw them appear from the portal and disappear into the forests around them. Hollows are souls that have taken too long to pass on. Normally you guys can't see them, but with me, Sui-Fong and Unohana around you guys as often as we are, you're going to see them now. He says as he stands as the first one appears from the canopy of the forest as Naruto's eyes harden. Stick to your teams, Ino, for the love of God, do not. Our Reapers never thought it'd have the chance to face one, the Uchiha says as he steps forward and grins. This one bore the resemblance of a gorilla. Are those hollows? Ino asks with a horrified whisper as Sui-Fong and Naruto nods as they step forward. And who are you, Hollow? Unohana asks the Hollow before the gorilla lets out a deep laugh before pounding his chest. You may call me Grodd. Gorilla Grodd. Says the Hollow and smirks at the Soul Reapers. I'll make your deaths very painful. Nothing will stop me from destroying you all. He says as he pounds his chest once more. How do we deal with hollows? Sakura asks as she tightens her gloves. Destroy the masks, that will purify them and send them on to the next life. Sui-Fong calls out as they began to be rushed down by the hollows as they prepared themselves for the fight before they split up into teams, as it would all be easier to deal with, Unohana staying back and ready to deliver medical assistance to those who needed. But she knew was going to be quite a few of them as this would be their first time fighting hollows. She muttered a small prayer as her eyes drifted over to Grodd, deciding to leave it to Naruto, who seemed as though he would fight him. Teammate. Damn it, these guys are fast. Kiba yells out as he was currently throwing kunai against one of the bigger hollows, which bounced off the mask and roars at the team. I can't see any energy flowing through them, it's just one massive ball of energy, Hinata says as she deactivated her eyes, as it would be more of a hindrance to the fight, draining her reserves even faster, as she could tell this would be a stamina fight first and foremost, as she began to backpedal, as the hollow roars at them and smashes the ground where she was at a moment ago. Thackeray encased her fist in the form of lions before she hit him, which caused the hollow to step back for a moment. Enraged that he felt pain, he roars at them once more before he opens his maw and began to charge a zero. Move, Kiba yells and smacks into the hollow's head, causing him to miss when the zero was released and disappeared into the air. Hinata sighs at this, glad it missed since she had seen what the other had done to the bridge earlier and it would absolutely wreck them. I can't land a good hit on him, Shino says, knowing his taijutsu wouldn't work against someone bigger and stronger than he is. You never fought an opponent blow for blow when they outclassed you in speed and strength, it would just cause you undue injuries. Damn it, I can't either, how are we going to break that damned mask? Kiba says as he looks at the hollow who roars at them once more and charges as Hinata uses a Jaiken strike against the thing's face and knocked him into a tree. The hollow pries himself free and manages to grab Kiba and Akamaru before throwing them against a tree as he yells out in pain. Shino, see if you can start draining the hollow, we can't keep this up. We'll have to play defensively, Hinata says as she uses a palm strike to block a blow from the hollow, making sure to keep him away from Shino, who nods as the bugs began to fly out of his body and coat and began to surround the hollow, who roars as he tries to remove them, but to no avail. Hinata was panting at this point as she was doing absolutely everything she could at the moment to keep them away from Shino. I don't know how much energy I can siphon before it overloads my bugs, but I'll do what I can. Shino says simply as Hinata nods at this as her eyes were steely at the moment. Usually, she was a shy woman who couldn't get through a conversation without stuttering, but at the moment, the others needed her, and she'll be damned if she lets them down now, as she was currently using anything and everything possible to keep him in one spot. Aren't we supposed to be the tracking and support team? Kiba asks with a groan before feeding a pill to Akamaru and nods. Fang over fang. He yells as they charged at the hollow who swipes at them, attacking them, but never getting a good hit. Meanwhile, Kiba was simply doing what he could to distract the hollow, having got the gist of the plan from seeing them. That flew out the window, did it not? Shino asks with a deadpan and keeps siphoning the energy as sweat pours down his face, his breathing ragged at this point. He had to keep going, otherwise this thing was going to kill his teammates. He groans as he felt he was only halfway done, but hoping it was just enough to allow the other two to break the mask. He could hear the moans from the other hollows, but focused on their fight for now. I'm starting to see a crack. Kiba yells out before stopping the fang over fang and recovers before looking at Hinata, who nods in his direction as she readies her chakra, deciding to use their technique that they had created. She climbs atop Akamaru as the bugs scattered off the hollow so they wouldn't be killed. Fang over fang. Kiba calls out, only this time, strings of chakra surrounded both drills and impacted the mask. The hollow roars before the crack grew and with one hard push, destroyed the mask as the hollow began to dissipate into the air as the three then fell to the floor. And the Fawn family does this every day. Kiba pants out as Unohana rushes over to them and began to heal Kiba. You did well, she smiles at them. Team 10. Shikamaru wasn't happy, not at the moment as he stared at the hollow, which had taken the form of a red-skinned Oni with a club, a kanabo weapon. He looked over to Ino, who had remembered Naruto's warnings not to take over its mind as she was thumbing some kunai at the moment. She wasn't much of a frontline fighter, but she did have some weapons, as well as sewn seals, that she had received from Tentaninkus. They had run into someone who could resist the mind control, and at the moment it seemed they would take over, Chaoji was standing in front of them ready to deliver his own strikes and block any attacks to the two, since he could certainly take a hit. Shika and Ino on the other hand were backline fighters through and through, and Chaoji knew this. Troublesome, he murmurs out as he watches as the hollow step forward and roars as he swings his club at them, taking down a tree, but its strength showing through as the club passes through the tree, as though it wasn't there as Chaoji, who used his body expansion, caught the club and stopped it, but groans as it had also smacked into his ribs. That's gonna bruise tomorrow, he groans out as he held the club, so the Oni like hollow couldn't pull it free. Shika, using this as an opportunity, extended his shadows and wrap it around the weapon as to trap it. The hollow, angry that he couldn't pull his weapon free, uses his other hand and began to smack Chaoji in the other arm and the chest as he groans with each powerful hit before he reaches out with one hand to stop it. Anytime Ino. Shika calls out as she unfurls a scroll that Tenten had given her, and out came a massive spike ball. Chaoji, seeing this, grins as he reaches out with his hand, letting go of the Oni's wrist hits his mask, throwing him back before he grabs the massive spike ball and throws it at him with a good amount of force behind it. The Oni, who was recovering, looks up in time to see the massive spike ball before it hit him and slammed him right into a tree. He snarled and roars before picking it up, showing he had just as much strength as Chaoji before hurling it back at the three of them. Crap. What's it take to put this guy down? Ino yells out as she dodged out the way and watches as the balls knocks a few trees down before falling into the ravine where the bridge is at. Certainly, more than what we are giving it, that's for sure, Shikamaru says as his mind was already working 100 miles an hour at this point as he was trying to come up with a plan. The hollow's biggest strength was just that, its strength, and he knew that it also had to build up power to deliver that strength, just like anyone else, so they had to restrain it so it couldn't use its power. It sounds so simple in practice as he moves his hands to his belt and nods, he had ninja wire. This would make things even easier, but how to use it? Ino, how many explosive tags do we have? He asks as he steps back. About 30, why? She asks him as she threw kunai at the demon-shaped hollow who was swinging his kanabo with reckless abandon at this point. I have an idea. When I tell you, throw them all at once. Got it? She yells back as she picked up a discarded kunai and throws it at the hollow's eye, who roars as he knocks it out of the air as Shikamaru disappears, as Ino and Chaoji were doing their best to distract it before she heard something a few moments later. Now Ino. Shika calls out from the woods as she nods, throwing them at the hollow, which exploded on contact as it began to throw it back. Eventually this caused the Oni to tumble back and land in wire and explosive tags. Shikamaru cutting one ninja wire and it encased the hollow in more wire and tags. Survive this. Shika calls out as he made a hand sign and all at once, the tags exploded and destroyed the mask, watching as it withers away. Phew done, Shika says as he collapses to the floor and looks up to the sky. Team 7. Naruto, Sui-Fong, Sakura and Kakashi stood across from the last hollow that remains, and from what the four of them could tell, he was much more intelligent than the rest of them, and that unnerved the hell out of them. You said your name is Grodd? Kakashi asks as he lifts his forehead protector to reveal his Sharingan. Yes, and it'll make this world nothing but hollows. He calls out and pounds his chest once more as he charges a Zero and fires it at Naruto, who manages to deflect it with his blade. Over my dead body. Sui-Fong calls out as she launches herself at him, hand reared back to mark him twice, and almost does it in one go, truth be told, before she was grabbed by the head by Grodd and slammed into a tree as he smirks. That's the plan, Reaper, it'll kill you all and turn you into hollows. He yells out as he charges at Kakashi, who was about to strike with his Rikiri, was surprised by this and couldn't finish the technique before the gorilla was upon him and smacked him into a tree as well. Yep. It's a good thing they had brought Unohana with them, and Sakura, if she could still heal after this, as Naruto charges him, going in for the slash only for his Zanpakuto to be grabbed and kicked hard in the stomach. I'm an Ajuchas for a reason, Reaper. Soon I'll be a Vasto Lord and absolutely nothing can stop me. He yells out before he was punched by Sakura and thrown into the forest, allowing the others to recover as Naruto groans out and rubs his neck. Damn it, the last time I was thrown around like this was when I accidentally peeked on the women's bath in Sirte, he murmurs out as his arm was smacked by Sui-Fong, who remembers the incident. Telling him never to bring it up ever again. He seems smarter than the ones the others are fighting, Kakashi says as Naruto nods. It just means Hess having a steady supply of souls to devour, no doubt taking whole towns to keep his Ajucha's status, Naruto says before he was surprised once more by a Zero and smacked into him and threw him a good 50 feet behind them. Sui-Fong, tired of seeing her lover and master thrown around, takes a step back and snarls. Bankai. She yells out as Grodd steps out of the forest and charges towards Sui-Fong. When he heard that, Sakura and Kakashi, who didn't know what she was doing, decided to protect her and intercepted Grodd. Sakura using her strength to keep him at bay, and Kakashi who uses a wind jutsu to throw him back and back into the forest. They managed to pause long enough to see this new thing attached to Sui-Fong. It looked long and golden as Sui-Fong looks at the two of them. Sakura, Kakashi, I'm going to have to ask you to throw Grodd a good 300 feet away, otherwise we'll all get caught in the blast radius. I can only do this once every 3 days, so we only have one shot at this, she says as the two nod. Naruto, feeling useless and seeing her pull out her Bankai, decided to go help as they began to fight with Grodd once more. I will kill you all and wear you like a damn suit. The gorilla Hollow yells out as he was beginning to get more and more angry at this. He wanted to kill them all, so that he was able to keep consuming souls. Damn it, and these reapers are getting in the way. I like my skin where it is, thank you very much. Kakashi yells out, having not used Kamui as it would drain him way too much and leave him vulnerable to any other hollows that might be lurking around, as Naruto, blocking a strike with his sword, kicks him away. Almost, Naruto says to himself, and with one swift and hard kick the hollow away and managed to flash step away after grabbing Kakashi and Sakura. Now Sui-Fong. Sui-Fong, who braced herself against a stump, raises the missile. Jakuho Reikabun. She yells out and flames began to spew from behind the missile as she groans out, trying to hold out before the missile launched and not lose her target before in one swift motion, the missile flew and headed straight to the gorilla. Grodd, seeing this, reaches out and grabs the head of the missile. I will not die here. He yells out before in a flash of light, the missile explodes, destroying the mask, and his body began to disappear as well as she pants. Damn hollows, she murmurs out before she collapsed, absolutely exhausting her spiritual energy. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video, bye bye.